Thanks for joining us on Not Boring CEs, where we don't think you should be bored to death while getting your continuing ed. Keep listening here, then hop over to notboringces.com to get all your online CE credits. All right, y'all, let's get to learning. Kelly is a psychologist who is specialized in working with queer populations, people who have experienced trauma and eating disorders for over 30 years. She worked in college counseling centers for the first half of her career, started an individual private practice after the birth of her first child, and then opened a group practice in 2021 so she could go back to providing supervision and training to others. Starting in 2020, her practice experienced many changes as she realized that many of her clients had undiagnosed ADHD and/or autism, and she had to do a deep dive into learning more about topics she'd avoided for years. She now loves to talk about issues of neurodivergence and how it interacts with her favorite topics, queer identity and eating disorders. So, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on the Not Boring CEs podcast and training. I'm psyched to talk about neurodivergence and queer identities with eating disorders because I think these
Me too.
overlaps, sometimes it's a triple overlap, sometimes it's a double overlap, but I am excited to dig into this. So let's start with neurodivergence and
Okay.
eating disorders. Why does it matter? Why does this need to be on our radar if we're working with neurodivergent folks or we're working with folks with eating disorders? How does it impact treatment? Give us the lowdown.
Okay. I guess before I give the lowdown, I just want to acknowledge that if neurodivergence is the spectrum, I'm probably on the more neurotypical side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I am somebody who, for the vast majority of my career, worked with queer folks, worked with eating disorder folks. I mean, like 25 years. And the whole time I was like, oh, I don't work with ADHD. I don't do autism. Those aren't my thing, and would refer people out.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of a combination of things, the pandemic, the start of TikTok, just more awareness around neurodivergence, all these things sort of all started to happen around 2020. Um, and I think people being home and not being on their routines and not being at work and having to deal with some of the things they always had to deal with at work,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was a good thing, like structure and a place to be, or if it was like overwhelming people or situations or fluorescent lights, whatever. I think that just over and over and over again, I had people come in, especially a lot of AFAB folks come in
Mm-hmm.
from my caseload that I've seen for years and be like, can you watch this TikTok? Because I think I have ADHD, or I think I'm autistic, or I think I'm this. And me over and over again being like, oh, I think you are too.
Mm-hmm.
And me realizing that I'd been missing stuff for so long
Yeah.
and having to do a lot of my own education in the last couple of years and reading a lot and trying to learn a lot. Um, and I just think it's important to start with that because I know I at first was like, oh my God, what have I missed for 2 decades?
Mm-hmm.
But also it's easy to miss for 2 decades. And I think that we are having a real cultural shift where
Mm-hmm.
we are finally talking about neurodivergence in a mostly positive awareness way. You noted earlier, it's also a weird week because the political landscape is not looking at it positively.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of therapists are finally becoming aware of neurodivergence and how much it impacts everything that our clients are presenting with.
Mm-hmm.
And just how much more common it is than we ever
Yeah.
thought. So,
Right. Which, I mean, also in our defense, because you and I have talked about this separately about God, how many people did we miss?
yes.
But in our defense, the way we were taught in grad school back in the day, because we've both been in our careers for over 20 years, it was like ADHD looks like these hyperactive little boys,
Yep.
and autistic folks don't speak half the time.
Right. Well,
It was
or
not a
autistic
spectrum.
folks are little boys in the corner with their trains or their dinosaurs
Right.
or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so I do think that that's a huge piece. Like, there's so much that AFAB folks were just not seen and were
Mhm.
overlooked. And I think particularly with autism, like
Mhm.
if you were female and autistic, like it just looks radically different, you know?
Right.
And boys were allowed to get away with being in the corner with their dinosaurs lining things up. Girls can't do that. The price is too high. And
Mhm.
so for them, the the hyper focus and the trying to figure things out becomes like, well, how do I study relationships and how do I study friendships and how do I
Mhm.
study what girls do so that I can fit in? Because
Right.
boys don't have to fit in. They can be the eccentric genius in the corner, whereas girls don't have that
Yeah,
luxury.
there's a lot
That's
more pressure to mask
so much more pressure.
in like early childhood, like in childhood for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that it's just become important for me to look at that. And yes, I do realize that I didn't have the training in it at
Hmm.
all. I had no training about autism, wasn't even mentioned, barely any training about ADHD. It was like, if you want to do that, then you can study it. Like,
Right. Yeah.
um, and so it's just very different now, you know? And I think that reading more, exploring more, becoming aware of clients that I was like, oh, that's it, you know.
Hmm.
So I s- I heard a statistic in a presentation, but never had the reference for it. And then I was re-listening to Unmasking Autism, which is an excellent book. Everybody should read that book. Where the author said that 20 to 37% of anorexics could also be autistic.
Hmm.
And when you think about the fact that many anorexics are assigned female at birth and, you know, like all these other factors that make autism a low diagnosed um, probability for them, it might be higher than that 37%.
Hmm.
Uh, and you and I talked about, it was like, oh, I can literally like think back on clients and be like, that's why they
Hmm.
were so rigid. That's why they held on so much to this. That's why they couldn't make this change in thought no matter how many times we talked about it, or they couldn't do this different behavior
Hmm.
no matter how many times we talked about it. um and I think it was really helpful for me of like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, and to think about how I might handle it differently now, you know.
Hmm.
um
But at
One
the
of my
time, like, so Kelly and I worked together in our last job before our private practices. And in that setting, in my setting, working in residential, like those folks were just labeled treatment resistant.
Yes, they were
And it
just
was,
difficult.
yeah, like, why aren't they
Yep.
doing right? Why aren't they listening?
Yeah.
So there was more of like a frustration with them not getting in line with the treatment recommendations
Sure.
instead of being more curious about it. Like, what if we just
Yeah.
been more curious?
Well, and I
Um,
think about, especially in like treatment centers or IOPs, like it, if you're dealing with somebody who's autistic and probably didn't know they were autistic, right? And depending on the environment, it could be so sensory overloading.
mm-hmm,
It could be, just so much for them to take in. Plus, then you're supposed to be doing all this emotion work that they're like, okay, whatever, while they're trying to figure out how to be present, how to do group, what does that even look like?
mm-hmm,
Um, you're having all this stuff, and then you you have somebody who might then have a meltdown, right? Like they might be having an autistic meltdown,
mm-hmm,
but all it looks like is they can't keep it together, they cry too easily, and then they get labeled manipulative,
mm-hmm,
and they need to leave and go to their room, or everything becomes about them and they're shut down because they can't engage. And so then they get manipulative, sometimes labeled by borderline, which is a whole
uh-huh,
other thing because
mm-hmm,
they have these big mood swings and they have
mm-hmm,
these outbursts and they have trouble with their relationships and all these things that really are probably the autism but get labeled as borderline,
right,
which is a whole other conversation, right?
right,
but then you're seen as difficult, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or you're autistic and you have sensory issues around the way things taste or the way they feel in your mouth, the texture, the temperature. And instead of it being like, oh, this is a neurological issue, this is a way your brain is wired issue, it's just you're excessively picky and you're treatment resistant and you're not willing to try new foods.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a whole treatment goal
Right.
when it could be a treatment goal in a accessible, supportive way instead of a shaming, you have to sit with that piece of broccoli forever kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think now that we have ARFID,
Yes,
um, like the overlap with neurodivergence and ARFID. I don't know the
huge,
number, but it's got to be yeah, way up there.
huge. Mhm.
And even when ARFID was first introduced, do you remember how people were like, I'm sorry, what? We have like a diagnosis for being picky.
Right.
And it's like that's not what it is. Like
That's not what
that's
it
a
is.
way oversimplified version of what ARFID is. It is like this neurological
And
experience of
yeah,
food. Yeah.
yeah. You know, and when you're in a field that is trying to get people to eat more broadly, right? Like
Hmm.
get out of your safe foods. Well, maybe we need to question why they're safe foods, not just about calories or not just about fat content, that like maybe they are safe foods in other ways, and we don't have to shame our clients about that, but we can then look at it differently to be like, okay, well, how do we broaden your idea of safe foods with
Hmm.
similar textures or similar tastes or similar levels of blandness or levels of spiciness, whichever way that particular person's needing to go, without it being seen as a problem and a
Hmm.
pathology,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they just are, you know,
Yeah.
seen that way. Um, yeah. And I think
And
that, okay, so your original question was about like how do eating disorders and neurodivergence overlap, right?
yeah, just like how,
Okay.
like, why is it important for us to have this on our radar at all as either eating
Right.
disorder therapists or folks who specialize with neurodivergent folks?
Um, it's so many things, right? And I think part of it is looking at, I believe eating disorder work is really about identity and about dissociation.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of people get very wigged out about eating disorder work because it's like, oh my God, it's the highest mortality, blah, blah, blah. That's all real. But it's also stuff that we do every day, right? And so if we look at it as identity work and we look at it about dissociation,
Hmm.
we have a lot more skills than we think we do,
Hmm.
you know? And both of those things can be relevant when we're talking about neurodivergence, if we're talking about queer identities, and within eating disorders, right? You know, so I think eating disorders infamously are not about the food, right? Like
Right.
it's not about food and it's not really about your body.
Hmm.
It's about a thousand other things. And I think for a lot of folks who might be neurodivergent, it's you know, it's a way to do what you're supposed to do. It's a
Hmm.
way to fit in. Um, it can offer this like world of rules and rituals that are like, well, this is just what you do, right? Like, and
Hmm.
if you're not sure how to fit in or how to deal with the world, and somebody says, well, eat this and you're going to be fine, t- like that sounds really appealing.
Hmm.
And for a lot of folks with neurodivergence, they're not very in touch with their body. Um, and it's hard to feel those bodily cues. So we're talking, you know, hunger, fullness. Do I have to pee? Am I cold or am I hot? Like it's just harder when there's so much stimuli to sort through and figure out how your body feels. And so again, if somebody gives you a plan, eat this at this point at this time in these ways, exercise this much, it's just a way to go through the motions of I'm in touch with my body without being in touch with your body,
Hmm.
you know? And it gives you a way to feel in control. It's a way to feel disciplined when maybe you're being told every other place that you're lazy and that
Hmm.
you're undisciplined or you can't just keep it together emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever. Um, I think for a lot of queer folks well, actually I'll stick with the neurodivergent folks, but like, um, it's also a way to like be defined as good or be defined as like worthy by your body and by your appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And when they might be struggling so hard to find a way to feel worthy, again, this, if especially if you go thin, it's like, oh, instant acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
instant approval
Mm-hmm.
by lots of people, particularly if you're female, like focusing on being thin and bonding with other girls about being thin and being on a diet gives a social in when maybe they didn't have one before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else? Then I think for a lot of queer folks, it's a little bit different.
Yeah,
But
and let's do like neurodivergent first,
first,
and then
okay,
queer folks, and then like the overlap of all
the
three
overlap.
and how that
Yeah,
looks.
okay.
Yeah, and
I
I'm
also
thinking
think,
like you mentioned, like eating disorders are not about the food,
right,
but like for a lot of neurodivergent folks, it's like literally about that food, like that
yeah,
texture or that.
right,
So like there is a piece where we have to be open and willing to hear that
yeah,
like no, like yogurt makes me want to die. Like I
right.
can't
Or
do
it's the
yogurt.
only thing I can eat because
Right,
chewing makes me want to die.
right, right.
Right. And I think with ADHD, it's a different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like not being in touch with your physical cues,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're in a hyper focused place.
Yeah.
If you're in a flow of a hyper focus and you're finally getting something done, you have no interest in stopping to eat. Like, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that's just not going to matter. And if you're ADHD and on meds, that's going to really impact things. Like
Mm-hmm.
you probably don't have an appetite all day, and then you're ravenous by the end of the day, and so
Mm-hmm.
that creates its own problems. You know,
Yeah.
um, and I think it just becomes these ways of being disconnected from your
Mm-hmm.
body or being so in your body it feels so uncomfortable so you want to disconnect from your body,
Mm-hmm.
like again the dissociation. And so it's just layered, so many
Yeah.
layers.
Yeah. And there's the layer of like needing that dopamine hit, like somebody with
Hmm.
ADHD and like food gives it to you.
Food does give it to
So
you.
like binge eating disorder can be high amongst folks with ADHD.
Hmm.
And um,
And it often is like binge
mhm.
eating disorder because some of what they're looking at with binge eating disorders is a lot of in binge eaters like spend all day busy, go 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 go, can't sit still, can't whatever. Also push down their feelings all day,
Mhm.
and then they get home and it's quiet and it's safe and it's calm and they don't know what to do with that. And
Mhm.
so then there's again the dopamine hit, the self-directed way to feel better in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll say like these behaviors aren't necessarily like indicative of an eating disorder.
Of
We're
course.
talking about the people who do have eating. So like if your kid is, not super interested in food or is like ravenous and eating most of their meal at night, it doesn't mean they have an eating disorder.
Right.
Um, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Just an
It's just the
example.
way they interact. Yeah.
Hmm.
Those things interact for sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so being like cognizant, if you are somebody who specializes in neurodivergent folks, but not eating disorders, like what are some things that they
Hmm.
should be asking or listening for in order to better screen or assess?
Those are great questions. I think just doing an eating disorder assessment,
Hmm.
asking about, do you ever purposely restrict or and then not purposely restrict, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
do you ever find yourself not eating for many hours at a time? Why? What happens? Like, what leads to that?
Hmm.
Um, Asking about things like safe foods. Do you have foods that are safe or that you're drawn to? Um, asking about a 24-hour recall.
Hmm.
Um, because what I find is, and you might find this too. When you ask somebody without an eating disorder for a 24-hour recall, they'll be like, okay, like, what did I have yesterday, right? And they can think about it, and it's often very varied. If you ask somebody with an eating disorder what their 24-hour recall is, they can give it to you because they eat the same damn thing every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it's so odd. It's like, well, for breakfast I have X or Y, and for
Mm-hmm.
lunch I have, A, B, or C, and it's just a different qualitative experience, even when they describe it.
Right.
Um, and so I think that that could be a piece that comes out differently
Mm-hmm.
when you're asking somebody. And again, that may not indicate they have an eating disorder. It may just be that they're autistic and they have a limited number of safe foods.
Mm-hmm.
But to even have that conversation is helpful
Yeah.
because, like an eating disorder, if you only have a certain number of safe foods or you only have two places you're willing to eat, this will impact you socially.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
therefore, it impacts other parts of your life,
Mm-hmm.
including anxiety and depression and social skills and relationships, because you're so limited.
Right.
Like, um, so I guess I would think of it in that way, like asking those kind of questions,
Mm-hmm.
asking about, do you have a sense of when you're hungry or when you're full? And again, like if no, what gets in the way, while
Mm-hmm.
also recognizing that everyone struggles with hunger and fullness cues. Like
Right. Yeah. We have learned to override them
we've
throughout our
learned to
lives.
override them. They're incredibly difficult to ascertain. Uh, it takes hours and hours and hours to feel different levels of hunger, and
Mm-hmm.
you can get full. You can go from a 5 to a 10 on the scale in 2 minutes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so there's all of that. But I think it's also important to recognize, oh, I have no idea when I'm ever hungry. I just eat
Mm-hmm.
because it's time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. How much are you in your body in general? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and just starting to ask those questions because that's important knowledge. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
you
And I'm
know.
thinking too, like if somebody does do a food recall and they're like, yeah, I didn't have much for breakfast. I didn't have much for lunch. I had like, you know, basically all of my food after 6 p.m. That also doesn't necessarily mean they have an eating disorder,
For
but it's
sure.
great information. And something that I've said to my clients with eating disorders for, the last 20 something years is like our bodies are so smart. And if they don't get what they need throughout the day, they will force the issue. And
Yeah.
it is very hard to not overeat if you've been restricting all day. And so, like,
Mm.
especially my clients who come in, they've been like dieting, and then they are feeling like a huge failure because, come 9 o'clock, they're trying to like settle down for the night and they
Yeah.
can't stop
Stop
themselves.
eating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also like just in general, the idea of, it's not a perfect analogy, but our bodies and our brains need fuel.
Hmm.
And, you know, the comparisons to it being a car or whatever, like not always the best analogy, but there's parts of it that work of like
Hmm.
you can't just not have fuel all day and expect to turn on your car and it work perfectly.
Hmm.
Like, like you need something for it to feed on, literally,
Yeah.
if you're going to be functional throughout the periods of day in any consistent manner.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I even just like marketing. I was at some sort of like marketing seminar or something like that, and they were saying like you want people to use as few calories as possible in their from their brain to understand what you're saying. And I was like, some of the people in this room probably didn't realize you use a lot of calories from like your brain is using a lot of calories, but now they know. Um, so like make things very clear was basically his point. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, we need calories obviously just to function, but like looking at basically how impaired is your client because they have either
Mhm.
not eaten enough or they have gone overboard and it makes them feel awful in their body. Like the next day they're
Yes.
feeling so sluggish or those kinds of things. Like looking at the
Sort of.
patterns there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. And
Um,
like, when are you seeing them? Right?
mm-hmm,
Like, are you seeing them at 2 in the afternoon and they haven't eaten since 7 the night before?
mm-hmm.
Like, that might impact things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime somebody's like just out in my normal life is like, oh yeah, I fast until whatever time and I'm just so much clearer and sharper. And I'm like, it's funny how that never worked for any of my clients. Never ever. So, hmm, we'll
Huh.
see. I'm going to trust you on your own experience because I'm not your therapist. Yeah. So, okay, let's shift gears some. Let's talk about queer folks
Okay.
and eating disorders and how um like just understanding the unique challenges when eating disorders intersect with those queer identities.
Right. I think first is just looking at like a minority stress model, right?
Hmm.
Like, um, if if you are in a minority, and in particular one that's being very demonized at the time at the moment,
Hmm.
um, that does produce stress. And then what do you do with that stress, and how do you cope? And eating disorders can be a lovely way to
Hmm.
cope in
Yeah, they
our
work
world,
so
because
well.
they work so well short
Yeah.
term,
Hmm.
and they are so socially acceptable
Hmm.
and encouraged. And so, that's a whole other piece of it.
Hmm.
I think particularly for trans folks, um, eating disorders or manipulating food, whether it's an eating disorder or not, manipulating food and manipulating their body makes sense to me, right?
Hmm.
That first of all, if you're trans and you hate your body, you're not really interested in taking care of it.
Hmm.
But also you can use food in some ways to shape it, right? So um, trans men might not eat as much to get rid of a period,
Hmm.
to get rid of their curves.
Hmm.
Um, Interestingly, like a lot of times when trans men go to have chest surgery, you can only have surgery if you're below a certain weight. Like, a lot of plastic surgeons won't even talk to you if your BMI is over a certain amount. But you're also encouraged to lose weight and bulk up your chest so that they know where your pecs will be.
Hmm.
And, so it's this whole other way of like manipulating your body in that way. I think trans women are just like cis women and fall prey to like thinner is better, like a certain look is a certain look, for a
Hmm.
reason. Um, I think anybody who's trying to attract the male gaze often experiences a lot more eating disorder behavior,
Hmm.
because there's at least the perception that there's a smaller range of what's okay.
Hmm.
Um, and if you think about like Grinder, and that kind of stuff, like, gay men are stereotypically much more explicit about what they like and what they don't.
Hmm.
No fatties.
Hmm.
I want a bear. I want, like,
Yeah,
are very
twinks only. Yeah.
twins only, are very explicit about
Hmm.
the kind of bodies that turn them on.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's just more out there.
Yeah.
Um, Lesbians, as a result, tend to have fewer restrictive eating disorders.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean they don't have eating disorders. It just means that they might have fewer of the restrictive ones.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that like some eating disorder behavior, like bulimia, can be easier to get away with in a high substance abuse culture.
Hmm.
Um, it's like, oh, I got so drunk and then I got sick, or we
Hmm.
went out to Waffle House and then I got sick. And it's like, well, yes, and that was actually a binge purge for you, but you
Hmm.
covered it with the drinking culture.
Right. Hmm.
Um, obviously straight people binge and purge, go to Waffle House after a night of
Right.
drinking too, but there can be more of a party culture with some parts of gay culture.
Hmm.
Um, let's see what else.
I'm thinking too about like trans women. People who were born in male bodies are typically like male bodies are typically larger than female bodies.
Mhm.
And so there's even just like the biological piece of like trying to be smaller to
Smaller.
pass.
Yeah.
And how I mean it's just it's hard enough for like a petite woman to be as small as she wants to be. Like
Right.
but to have this body that doesn't want to do the thing that you're trying to force it to do,
Yeah,
um, it just makes it so much harder for folks.
it does. And it's interesting. I have a friend whose child is trans male and went through a period where he just stopped eating.
Hmm.
And it was clear later he did it to stop his period, to get smaller, to have fewer curves because it was like puberty time.
Hmm.
Um, but as a result, they also stunted their growth.
Hmm.
And so in a family where every single person is between 5'10" and 6'7", this kid's like 5'4",
Wow.
and
Hmm.
so it backfired and it's really sad
Yeah.
because they weren't able to achieve what they ultimately wanted, you
Hmm.
know, um, and probably would look very different if they could have continued to eat and been on puberty blockers and had the gender affirming care they needed and all of those things together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think it also just really gets to that piece of like, how do you take care of your body in a world that tells you that you should hate your body
Right. And
and that
yourself.
and that tells you that certain bodies are more valuable than others,
Hmm.
right? Like BIPOC folks, chronically ill folks,
Hmm.
disabled folks, like it, trans folks, like they're just not as valuable. And so, how do you even learn to love your body and care for yourself?
Right. Yeah. If there's a clear line between who you are and what is valued in our culture,
Yeah,
how do you find that value in yourself?
right,
Especially when like maybe you don't value your body because
right,
you've bought into what everybody else has bought into,
yeah.
like the thinner is better or whatever.
Or it's just not the body you want it to be.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It's really really painful and
Yeah.
hard to sit with that. You
Hmm.
know. Because I think if you're working with a cis woman who is like, oh, I just, I want a different kind of body, um, you might be talking about like, I want curves these places and not these places, you
Hmm.
know, um, which is also hard to deal with sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But that's very different than, no, I literally want a very different body.
Hmm. Right. I want a different body on the level that the cis woman wants a different body plus.
Plus,
And so, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And like I think about we were talking about like gay male culture and you know twinks and bears and the fact of the matter is like most people don't fit into either of those. Like most people don't fit into the categories that people are asking for,
Correct.
right? Like everybody's just kind of an in-betweener.
Yeah.
Um and like wants to be one way or the other if they're struggling with an eating disorder. I know like I've also seen a lot of like intense physical exercise amongst my gay male clients. Like they
Mhm.
really, really want to have this
The
particular
V
physique.
cut and yeah,
Yeah. And like
yeah,
it's just not attainable for everybody, period, much less in a healthy way.
yeah. Well,
And
and one of the things that was a good reminder, like I said, I just re-listened to Unmasking Autism. They also talked about that some of that excessive exercise for some folks who are autistic and have eating disorders is actually a stim. right? Like it's
Mm.
actually a stimming behavior
Mm.
to pace a certain, way. Or the author talks about spending 2 hours a night doing Dance Dance Revolution. And that part of it was the exercise drive, but it also was incredibly powerful as a stim for them
Mm-hmm.
and helped manage some of their autism.
Right.
And, and I think that's a piece that definitely was overlooked by me
Mm-hmm.
and lots of folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say there's a therapist out there listening who specializes in anxiety, like queer folks with anxiety, right?
Okay.
I mean, I've personally never treated anybody with an eating disorder who didn't also have anxiety.
Correct.
So, like, what should they be asking? What should they be looking out for around eating disorder thoughts or behaviors amongst their queer anxious clients?
Um, that's a great question. It makes me wonder, kind of like when we talk about the difference between disordered eating behavior, which is society,
Mm-hmm.
disordered eating behavior and an eating disorder. And
Mm-hmm.
so maybe starting to ask questions or think about, like, how much does this drive your life? How much does it impact your life? Um, so even those questions, about food or food intake, well, what happens if you can't go to one of your two safe restaurants? How are you going to cope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you can't have your safe food, or if you can't exercise, how are you
Mm-hmm.
going to cope? Where, because I think there's a difference between, oh, it really, I'm less anxious if I go for a run every day
Mm-hmm.
and, manage my ADHD better or whatever if I
Mm-hmm.
go for a run every day, which is very real, versus I'm going to fall apart, I'm going to obsess, I'm going to ruminate on it. It's all I'm going to be able to think about, and then I need to make up for it the next day. Like that's a
Right.
different
Right. It's like, what's the
presentation.
rumination about if you're not
Mhm.
running? Is it about life or is it about not running?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or food intake or
Or
making up
food
for it.
intake or the calories or making up for it. Yeah.
Hmm.
The like
Yeah.
constant, I think that's a piece, like the constant ledger in your
Hmm.
head.
Yeah.
And like what's in your ledger, right? Like are you counting calorie in, calorie out, fat content, that kind of stuff? Or like is your rumination, yeah, about like, oh, I said this weird thing and now my friend's gonna reject me.
Hmm.
Like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way to make that distinction. The ledger. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of folks with eating disorders have very intense ledgers.
Hmm.
Like,
Yes.
they have like Excel spreadsheet galore
Hmm.
inside their head and are constantly weighing all these things,
Hmm.
whereas folks maybe without an eating disorder just they don't even have a ledger. They
Hmm.
just eat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, I think it's time to eat or I'm hungry. It's time to
Right?
eat.
That looks good, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. And I think about like, I don't want to leave out our binge eating disorder folks, like,
For
because I
sure.
think the ledger is often stronger for the folks that restrict.
Yes.
And
Good point.
while a fair number of our binge eating folks are restricting all day, trying to make up for a binge the night before or whatever, um, there might be some sort of a ledger. But for other folks with binge eating disorder, there is no ledger. They're having like their feelings pile on and they
Mm,
need that dissociation that
mm,
food can provide and or that dopamine hit that it
yeah.
provides for a moment until they feel like absolute shit because
Yes.
they've gone beyond the limit of what their body can process in a way that helps them feel good.
Yeah. And
Um,
similarly with the bulimia, like it's very
mhm,
similar.
right.
And I think that those strong physical experiences of binging to the point where you feel like you're going to explode and then purging and the emptying of that, those are very strong physical sensations,
Hmm.
which if you're somebody maybe on the autistic spectrum who doesn't have a lot of connection with their body and needs these intense physical experiences to feel in their
Hmm.
body, like that offers that as well.
Right. Similar with
Yeah.
ADHD, like you're
And
getting
the
dopamine
ADHD.
with both sides, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah.
the dopamine hit, the rush of what it's like to be in your body, to the and the clearing of your head just for a minute. Just for a
Hmm.
minute. You know, like
Yeah.
where it's like, and then of course, I mean that's the problem with eating disorders is that it all comes back, right?
Right.
Like you can feel good in that binge purge and all the thoughts clear away and it's a moment of silence and peace until later,
Right. Right.
you
When
know,
now you've got all the things you were trying to shut out, plus you feel like crap
the
about
guilt,
what you've done, or
the
your body
shame.
feels like crap, or
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
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 So I'm thinking about like, we were talking about really rigid treatment models that we
Mhm.
were kind of brought up on early in our eating disorder treatment career.
Right.
And how those, we talked about how those leave out neurodivergent folks. They're not considering their experience or valuing their experience.
Yeah.
How do our outdated treatment models impact queer folks?
Um, hmm. I think that they are getting better. Those are getting better. At least a lot of the treatment centers I know are getting better. Even just about trans folks, like, you know, basic things. What are your pronouns and what name would you like us to call you? Not
Right.
what's on your insurance card.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Having housing for trans folks
Mm-hmm.
is really important. And some centers are better than that than others. I'm gonna find. Hold on one second. There's the thing where I have this resource. I think it's Project Heal. No, I'll find it and get it to you. But there's a resource where this organization has ranked every residential treatment eating disorder for eating disorders on gender affirming
Oh, wow.
things, and so you get a score. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, be even more amazing if I could find it. Um, oh, yeah, it's called the Fed Up Collective, and it's
Okay.
an accessible eating disorder treatment scorecard. Um, so if you look up Fed Up, it's all one word in capital collective. You can find it.
Mhm.
So I think that's a piece. I think just acknowledging that being queer in this culture can be stressful and can contribute to things is certainly important.
Mhm.
um all the trans pieces that we talked about earlier, and I guess like any of the queer pieces of like why it might be hard for you to love your body.
Mhm.
um um I think those pieces are important in
Yeah.
adjusting our expectations, you know.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about how when I was in residential treatment, this is more the neurodivergent piece, but when I was in residential treatment, I remember, uh, gosh, this was back in the early aughts, um, and or early aughts, and it was like, oh, you have ADHD and you restrict. We need you to get off your meds.
yes,
And like thinking about that
yes.
now, holy, setting
Holy
people
hell.
up to fail.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
people who like cannot, literally cannot do the things that people around them can do. And we're talking to them about valuing themselves and taking good care of themselves. And then we are taking away the thing that has made that possible for them, maybe since childhood.
Yeah. And
Holy.
allows them to sit still through hours and hours and hours of group therapy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be able to take it in and not just focus on the thing flapping in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
like from the air conditioning vent.
Yeah.
Um, Plus, a lot of my clients talk about like this sort of bonus piece with ADHD meds that it helps a little bit with some of the emotional regulation
Mm, yeah.
and that they don't feel as extreme. And, you know, that could be for lots of reasons. Maybe because it's taking away some of the um, overstimulation, maybe because then they are able to be more capable of doing the things they know they can do, so don't feel as
Mm-hmm.
bad internally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for some folks, I've had them talk about it just reduces the shame voice, the
Mm-hmm.
like, you're not good enough, you're a lazy piece of shit voice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so, yeah, like taking those meds away.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
like I think about like Dr. Barkley, who's an ADHD expert, has said like so many times that ADHD is like a terrible name, obviously.
yeah,
That it's not an attention deficit disorder. It's actually more of an emotion regulation disorder.
right.
And so here you've got somebody learning to regulate their emotions. Like their emotion regulation has gotten so bad that they ended up in residential treatment because they were
Yeah.
managing it the only way they knew how, and you take away one of their primary coping mechanisms that neurobiologically they need in
Yeah.
order to like even be at the baseline that sucked, right?
And it, even if even if you're like what they have to learn to identify what their hunger fullness cues are, they have to eat like everybody else in the residential treatment. That's not actually accurate because when they leave and go back on those ADHD meds and they're not
Mm-hmm.
hungry until 4 o'clock when the meds wear off, they still have to learn to set an alarm and eat at 8 and at 11:30 and at 2 because they're going to crash at 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our work with our clients is like, I know we're trying to talk to you about being more aware of your hunger and fullness cues. And in this case, you don't have a hunger cue, but you have to eat anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Right,
You
right.
know, like, I know I'm
Yeah.
talking out of both sides of my mouth, but here it is,
Yeah. And I mean, I even have to do that with my kid with ADHD who doesn't have an eating disorder. She's like, I'm just
right?
not hungry. And I'm like, sorry, it's eating time.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
your body
And
needs
that's
fuel.
that's part of what they have to learn to be successful in
Hmm.
the world. And so, yeah, taking that out is just nutty, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think the pieces of like what we used to say about clients who just were treatment resistant, or
Hmm.
would just melt down for no reason or have a tantrum and be manipulative. It's like, well,
Hmm.
there were probably lots of other factors that were going on
Hmm.
around emotional regulation that was not under their control,
Right.
you know. And I think that we've gotten better in general around sensory stuff, you know.
Hmm.
I know in my practice, like we tend to focus on folks who are neurodivergent. There are squishmallows everywhere. There are fidget toys every possible place you look. There's soft textures and soft lighting and like plants everywhere. Like there's a real hominess
Hmm.
that allows people to like settle in. Um, some of our clients like sit on the floor, and so we have floor pillows, and just this idea that you don't have to sit and do therapy in a certain very rigid,
Right.
like structured way
Hmm.
can be very helpful. That we can color while we're doing therapy or do a fidget or do these things that help engage part of your brain so
Hmm.
that the rest of the emotions and talking and everything else can also happen. That
Yeah.
it's not instead of, it's actually to facilitate these things.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think before it was seen as distraction and you weren't doing the work.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
If you're doodling or coloring in group, you weren't paying attention.
Hmm.
And it's like, no, I need to do this to pay attention.
Right. Yeah. I remember it was allowed in residential treatment that people could like knit or crochet.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I mean, that's pretty progressive for the early odds. At least we had that right there. But like, I mean, it's like everybody learned how to crochet.
Yeah.
Everybody in the unit because it was like it was genuinely helpful for people to
And
pay
it's genuinely
attention
helpful.
and like,
And it's another STEM. It's a,
yeah, and
it's
our
a
folks with eating
socially acceptable
disorders,
STEM.
yeah, our folks with eating disorders really like a rhythmic movement in general.
Yeah.
That's part of like chewing, like for folks, I think back on like, for folks with binge eating disorder or folks who binge in general, like can we introduce a different rhythmic activity? Was something I was taught long ago that I'm like, how did we not realize? This is stimming. This is like this overlaps
A
something.
lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's the piece like one of my there's a great resource. It's called neurodivergentinsights.com. It's a psychologist who writes about all these different neurodivergent insights and does great like infographics and that kind of stuff. But one of my favorite, she does a misdiagnosis Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
And so she will do all these Venn diagrams of like things and how they go together. And it's a great resource. Um, but my favorite Venn diagram is she did ADHD, autism, and OCD over that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this huge, like, I don't know what that shape thing is in the middle, right?
Uh-huh.
Where there's just so much overlap between these three neurodivergent issues. And I always joke, like, if you take that, you just slap a big rainbow flag right on top. Like, because there is just this, like,
Mm-hmm.
correlation, certainly I'm not going to talk about causation, but there's a high correlation
Mm-hmm.
between queer folks and those things, and particularly gender,
Mm-hmm.
um, and those things. I don't know why. I
Yeah.
wish I knew why. I have no idea. I have ideas, but, um, and so I just think it's important to acknowledge that, so no
Mm-hmm.
matter what if you're coming at it from an eating disorder or a neurodivergence or a queer therapist lens, you got to be looking for the other two
Mm-hmm.
just because it's a high overlap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. So like let's look at the overlap of queer, neurodivergent folks with eating disorders.
Mhm.
When you've got all three in the mix, what are considerations that we really need to be on top of?
Hmm. I guess one, just like making sure you're a safe place and like reassuring them over and over again that you're a safe place and like
Mm-hmm.
getting feedback from them of what can make me feel more safe,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just recognizing that safety is going to be an issue
Yeah.
for all those groups, right? Like, are you a safe person? Can I unmask? Can I be real? Choose
Mm-hmm.
your choose your language, right?
And real quick, because saying like, I'm a safe space, you can be yourself with me is not the way to create a safe space. So like, what are some examples of like how you show your clients that whatever they want or need to express is welcome?
Um, I think for us, like having the physical environment be one um that like we have fidgets, we have floor pillows, we have these things that indicate that maybe you don't just sit
Mm-hmm.
quietly on the couch. I think that those things help. I think some of it's even just that knowledge of like when they talk about something and you're like, oh yeah, like you're just stimming, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yes.
and like sort of labeling and acknowledging it for them. Or if they're doing a stim behavior in session, you're not like, what are you doing? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, um, or even just saying like if you need to I don't know, I guess I don't say if you need to stim you have to, but like I think there's ways you just sort of treat it like okay, how else do I create safety? I mean, definitely with the queer stuff is there's basics like, I mean, I hate to say this in 2025 because it feels so basic, but look at your paperwork. Look
Mm-hmm.
at your paperwork. Like, are you using phrases and asking about identities in a way that's affirming? It's
Right.
shocking to me how much that still is not done.
Yeah. Preferred pronouns? No.
No.
Don't put preferred
Pronouns
pronouns.
used.
Just, yeah. What are your pronouns?
Yes.
Because I remember that was like a big thing we changed in our paperwork back when we were working, which was,
Mhm.
a good
Huge.
first step. But we know better now that it's
Right.
not just like, oh, which do you prefer? It's like, who are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And using that name.
Hmm.
And if you're in a bigger practice, teaching your staff.
Yes.
Because if you're in a big practice and you have a admin person, they need to be as respectful as mindful about names and pronouns as the people behind the door. Because
Hmm.
if they're not as respectful, those people will leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what an awful experience to be dead named, like
Right.
as you're going to therapy for the first time.
Mhm.
No thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else helps? I mean, we have simple things like, we have pride flags around, or we have we just have a lot of rainbow decor.
You've
Um,
got a rainbow necklace on right now.
I have a rainbow necklace on. We have a lot of like trans color kind of stuff. What else though? But there's more to it than that, obviously. Um, I think really just like knowing the language sometimes just helps. Like having a little bit
Hmm.
of information either about queer culture or about neurodivergence and like throwing in some of the language like stim, right? Instead of
Hmm.
how do you stimulate yourself, right? Like
Right.
or time blindness, right? Like time
Hmm.
blindness is one that comes up a lot with especially ADHD, but with autistic folks too.
Hmm.
And I love that term. Like I
Yeah.
love that term, and clearly like neurotypical folks can have time blindness too, but
Hmm.
much less frequently,
Right.
and less sort of intense.
Hmm.
Um, you know, so I think like finding those words, throwing out those words can be helpful.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, I'm
it's
thinking too
it's
about that like ADHD client who's consistently like 5 minutes late,
yes,
10 minutes
and
late,
not
and not
making it a
shaming.
therapeutic issue.
Right. And just being like, oh, like you were a time optimist today, huh? Like,
Yes, yes, because I think historically that would have been a thing to process. You're
Yeah.
not prioritizing therapy. You aren't respecting my time. You're not respecting yourself. It's like, no, I can't get my shit together to get anywhere on time. It's not about you.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you know, I'm either 30 minutes early or I'm 5 minutes late. There's no in
Uh-huh.
between,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And I do think having that flexibility, knowing that, maybe sometimes joking about it, but just acknowledging it is
Hmm.
really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
thinking
that's a
too
great one.
about like folks who are used to working with neurodivergent and queer folks, but maybe not as used to eating disorders. And one of the terms that like, I hate to give GLP-1s credit, but I think that they have really, like people know the expression food noise now
Correct.
because of them. And so like asking about food noise,
Hmm.
um, and like even just knowing that term can help them if they have an eating disorder or if they're a part of like the disordered eating world, it it makes them feel safe to talk to you about food and body stuff.
It does. And that term is really difficult because is it, this is that distinction between, to me, of sort of similar to the disordered eating or eating disorder. Like, is it food noise and it's excessive and it's in your head all day long? Or is it just food cues?
Right. Is
Is
that
it
what hunger
just
is?
what hunger is? Like, because it's actually not normal to go 8 hours and not feel hungry.
Right, right. But if it's like food noise all day long, like
Right.
a lot of our folks with eating disorders experience, then,
Yes.
or
Could
even the
be.
interpretation of like, yeah, I get food noise when I've been fasting for 12 hours, then that also gives you clinical
Information.
information.
Correct.
Hmm.
Correct. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think that like that overlap of these three is so much more common than any one specialty
Yeah.
knows.
Agreed.
And I love a niche. I love a niche, but I don't want us to get so deep into our one niche that we don't catch the overlap.
Right.
And if like Kelly, you want to have a practice that specializes in neurodivergent queer folks with eating disorders or disordered eating, then like, hot damn, you'll get full because
We're full.
yeah,
Yeah. And
and
I
group
think the
practice.
other,
Yeah.
yeah, because I'm so with you. I love a niche. I believe in a niche really intensely. And all three of these together actually is a niche.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
100%.
and I'm going to tell you, if so the things that we say we specialize in, we always say those first three: queer folks, neurodivergent folks, eating disorders. then you got to throw in, because there's a high correlation, uh, diverse relational styles.
Uh-huh.
So we
Mm-hmm.
work with tons and tons of poly folks, um, and folks in the kink community,
Mm-hmm.
because again, STEM,
Right.
different stimulations. And then because we're in the South, religious shame and
Mm-hmm.
religious trauma,
Yep.
and they just kind of stack right up. And
Mm-hmm.
so while I do love a niche, it's like a crevice of like it's a deep niche that has a lot in it.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
all overlap, and often you get in somebody for one,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about the religious trauma, and then you're like, oh yeah, part of that is sexual, and you've been shamed for all these other things, and then now you're not eating, and that like you just
Mm-hmm.
it all overlaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
And I think it's just such a gift to the community to have a place that they know will accept them,
yeah,
you know,
I
and that will
appreciate
help them through those
that.
hard parts.
Yeah, that's actually a lot. Like, I appreciate you saying that, but that is a lot of the feedback we get. A
Mm-hmm.
lot. Both from our referral sources of like, I know I can send anybody with an eating disorder to you, or anybody who's neurodivergent to you, or anybody who's queer to you. Like, that always feels like a gift when I hear that.
Yeah.
And our clients say it too. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I know we're safe here. Like, and I think for us, we know that because we have so many referrals from our own clients,
Mm-hmm.
which in a small town creates its own
Mm-hmm.
struggles that, we're seeing everybody's, and they're all poly, right? So it's like,
Right.
I'm seeing this person's partner, and you're seeing this part of the couple, and you're seeing this best
Mm-hmm.
friend, and, like,
Yeah.
it's all in there.
The group practice becomes this interesting, like, poly hub. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Whatever works, right? Like,
Whatever.
I mean,
It's fine. We have
yeah.
boundaries. We have boundaries. We're good.
Uh-huh. And helping everybody else with theirs too, so everybody gets to be
Exactly.
healthy. Yeah.
Yes. So,
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like if we hung up the call right now, you'd be like, oh, damn, I didn't say
hmm,
this?
let me think. Um, no,
Okay, nice. We did a good job then.
we did. We did. It's helpful to cover all that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, folks, I hope that this is helpful. If you're like, a lot of this made sense to me, but I'm not sure about the poly thing, we do have a training on ethical non-monogamy that
Great.
I really, really, I learned a lot. Like, I'm not a noob to like the poly community. I'm not personally a part of it, which I think is why I learned so much. And I was like, oh, wow, this is a great conversation. So listen to that one too.
Nice.
And we have other eating disorders and neurodivergent conversations. So, yay. Thank you so much, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I hope that broadened your clinical horizons. Head over to notboringces.com to get your CE credit. Want to have a not boring conversation with me about your clinical area of expertise? You can apply there too. If you like this conversation, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and be sure to subscribe for future conversations.